Now, viewers have been approaching the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa, angered by the SABC's decision to air an interview with the mother of convicted child rapist Nicholas Ninow. Now, the public broadcaster says that it's dealing with the matter and will respond to complaints lodged against it via the BCCSA. So, outrage over the interview has been widespread and has brought questions to the fore about editorial decisions, whether some stories should be told or not. Now, to help us unpack this dilemma, a journalist, a media communications specialist lecturer at the Tshwane University of Technology, and also the Education Committee chairperson at SANEF, Tshamano Makhadi, joins us now. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter.
All right, so this is a difficult one for the SABC. One of the voices that wasn't heard during the trial suddenly made themselves available and were going to give a version of whatever it is that they wanted to say. And because it's a voice that was mentioned during the course of the trial, particularly in the sentencing proceedings, one would have thought that maybe this is a voice that the public might want to hear from. But there's been public outrage, and so we're busy trying to unpack this issue. I'm going to ask you to put on your journalist teacher hat, and I'm sure that over the next few days you're going to sit and discuss this issue with your students. And let's begin with, as the story came to the fore, what would be the editorial decision-making process that you would have to make to decide whether this story is told or not?
So maybe let me start by saying one can understand the fury. One can understand why people are so angry about this particular story. Well, of course, I mean, given the circumstances, you're talking about an 8-year-old who's been, raped, and the victim, rather the perpetrator, acknowledges these facts. So, from a journalistic point of view, I would say it is a story that it was worth telling. And I say this for two reasons. One, South Africa, we are one of those countries that are battling with issues of drugs. When a mother feed her own child with drugs at the age of 13, that's a problem. There's probably another mother who's sitting out there watching the same interview, and they get the opportunity to see the consequences of their actions. As we've heard from that testimony when Nicholas himself gave his testimony, it was his mother who was doing drugs. He joined, and the two of them were the best of friends, and they could not see anything wrong about it. But of course, there were always going to be consequences.
So you would do the story. The public say we shouldn't have done this story. How do you explain it to them that it's a story worth telling, or is it the way that the story was done that might have angered them?
Look, there are too many layers, but let me deal with the first one. The first one for me is that there's so much anger. People, of course, do sympathize with the victim, and one can understand a country that, amongst other things, we have, stories of so many victims, especially women, in this case, a child. So one can understand why people are so angry. Do you do the story? Do you not do the story? Look, people are reacting in this way simply because they're angry. But then another thing, Peter, which whether we want to accept it or not, but let me say it here. South Africa, we're a nation that is still dealing with issues of race. It's a fact. Now, you have a mother whom, and I'm saying this because these comments are there on social media. You go and you read all of these things. If the mother was black, would people still react the same way? Is this a case of, let's say, the national broadcaster taking, trying to, put a story of Nicholas and try to sort of put him as somebody who is not probably a bad person. Maybe he did that under the influence of drugs. So you have all of these things mixed in this bag, and it becomes a very difficult subject to deal with. And I can understand the nation is probably divided. Is there right?
Is there ever a case for not telling a story? That sometimes it's better not to tell a story than to tell it? Or are we now treading on dangerous territory of censorship and editorializing and feeding the public that which we feel that they should be exposed to?
That's one of the biggest dangers. That's one of the biggest dangers. And I would dare say we should never get to a space like that. What is it that we are, afraid of? Because I don't think anyone would go out there and try to portray Nicholas' family as a good family. No, I don't think so. The bottom line is that this voice, in my view, it's an important voice. It's important to hear what she has to say. You see, if she was not involved at all, it would be a different story altogether. But the young man himself, he said it on record, saying, my mother used to give me, drugs at the age of 13. Worse when you're talking about a minor.
So I suppose the context of the story and the interview then becomes the critical issue in terms of why you do an interview at a particular point in time, the motivation for that interview, and how it may serve the public interest.
Well, what could be the motivation in this case? The perpetrator has already been sentenced. Are we talking about a motive to try and get him a parole? I don't think so. Are we trying to portray him as a good person? Despite, had it not been for this, he would have reacted differently. I also don't think so.
All right. Okay. It's a story that's trending. It will continue to be discussed, but I think it's an important one because these issues will come up time and time again, and the public perhaps just need to think through some of the things.
Maybe it's also important to also just say we of course, without doubt, Peter, condemn what has happened. I speak as a father sitting here. I would probably feel the same way that the family is going through. There are many parents out there that are definitely outraged by this.
I have run out of time, but one important question I do have to ask you, though, and I asked a legal person before, what about the rights of the child? Because she's around 8 years old. She knows what's going on around her. This isn't helping her in her healing process. Is there a case then that you say, for the child's sake, we'll pull the story?
Look, it's a tough balancing act, Peter. For the sake of the child, what do you do? But I go back to the first point. South Africa is a country that is ravaged by serious problems, especially when we're talking drugs. You would know there are so many stories. A young man kills his mother as a result of drugs. So it's a problem that we have to confront. But on the one hand, there are going to be consequences like the ones that we are sitting with here today.
Should the SABC pull the story or not? The public is saying take it off air. Do we take it off air or keep it on air?
No, put it on air. The story is already there.
Okay. All right. Tshamano, thanks so much indeed for joining us and giving us your thoughts on this story that's playing out quite a bit on social media at this time. All right. Now,